All right, well, we are waiting for Member Jordan to arrive, but I think to honor everyone's time, we can go ahead and begin as a gathering rather than a committee meeting. So, do you want to call the roll, or do you want to wait until he arrives?
We generally wait until he arrives, so you have to pass on approving the minutes, and generally we just move right on into the financial presentation, and once Mr. Jordan arrives, then we can stop and either finish the presentation and then go back and do minutes, or however.
Okay, very good. And I will ask everyone to speak up. Board Member Hudson is on the phone, so please do speak up. So, Mr. Treasurer?
Okay, thank you very much. This is the monthly financial report for the month ending September 30th of this year, 2018. Total revenues now year-to-date exceed plan by about $17 million. That's down from a $30 million favorable variance last month, primarily due to some timing issues we discussed last month, and I will note later on, but they worked themselves out as we expected. Total expenditures continue to run under plan this month and reach approximately $10 million under plan year to date. When those are combined, yields a cash balance of approximately $27 million above plan at this time, the end of September. Looking at some major revenue categories, in property taxes, there was no activity this month. It remains at about $7.7 million over plan. And remember from last month's discussion, we talked about how the plan was formulated, and I believe that it created a little bit of the variance based upon how it was formulated, and we expect that to work itself out or be diminished somewhat by the time we get to the March 2019 settlement, the next settlement period that we'll get into this fiscal year. State aid climbed to about $3.8 million above plan. In the notes that accompany the financial report, there's a comparison of the plan, which was based upon the May 18 five-year forecast, to the most recent numbers from the Ohio Department of Education. It shows that the Ohio Department of Education numbers, and this would be for the second payment in September, the most recent one, those are running about $1 million over the five-year forecast, and of that, about $634,000 corresponds to two bonuses that we get. One's referred to as the graduation bonus and the third grade reading bonus, and that $600,000 was not specifically identified in the five-year forecast. So it's coming in, it wasn't in the forecast, so we know that that should be a favorable variance for the year. I looked at the numbers in the five-year forecast for May, the five-year forecast for October, and our plan, and they're all within a couple $1 million of each other, running from about $355 million and some change and to $357 million. So we should be within that ballpark this year. All other revenues combined are running just about $5.7 million above plan, and as we look at that, first thing I'll note is that one of the larger variances from last month had to do with the property tax allocation. It was received last month but planned for this month, and so you can see that that variance has worked itself out. On that, roughly $16.7 million in actual revenues were within $830,000 of plan. Other revenues are primarily driven by what we call pilots, the payment in lieu of taxes. And they represent $4.3 million of the $6.2 million over plan. And then investment income accounts for about another $1.2 million over plan. And as I've talked before, we are very conservative in the pilot payments and the investment income, but we already know that on investment income, we will undoubtedly exceed what's in the plan for this year. Other financing sources stands at about $1.4 million under plan. We had a $2.9 million favorable variance last month related to the timing of transfers in. And again, that's another timing variance that worked itself out. And Mr. Jordan is now joining the meeting. When you look at other details in the other financing sources in the report, you'll see that the unfavorable variance in advances in is somewhat offset by the $2.4 million favorable variance we have in terms of the refund that we received from the county auditor treasurer's fees. So some of the under is offset by now some of the over. So other financing sources is 1.4 million under plan on right around $12 million of actual receipts. If we go over to expenditures, personal expenditures fell another $2.5 million under plan this month to $8.8 million under plan year to date. Of all the variances and expenditures, this represents the largest dollar amount. However, for the October 5-year forecast, which we just completed, is based in part on the actual results for 18, and we know that we had favorable results in 18. So factoring that into the most recent October forecast, you'll see that the personnel line item in the October forecast is about $8.2 million less than the May forecast, largely based upon our actual results. The point of this is the plan, the cash flow plan that we're referencing now, was based upon the May forecast. And since we've lowered that estimate for the October forecast, about $8.2 million, you can see that we are anticipating that relative to the plan, we should end the year $8 to $9 million under this, so that we're in line with the October forecast. So we've already taken in that favorable variance, if you will. We've already taken that into account in our most recent forecast. We just don't update the cash flow plan. So we know if you look at this, you go, well, we continue to run $8 million, $9 million under plan. How's that going to affect the forecast? Well, we've already put that in the October forecast. So we've talked about this timing before. We do a May forecast and we don't know what the state budget is, and then we find out what the state budget is and we do an October forecast, and you don't know how the previous fiscal year is going to end. So we just keep updating and adding things in as we get better and better information. In the charter schools area, it's on plan. We're beginning to see, the more recent numbers flow in, and we'll see more of that in October. When we look at all other expenditures, combined, those variances represent just $700,000 on $27.4 million in expenditures. Purchase service supplies running under, not quite as far under as we have in the previous years, but as you know, our plan, we did factor in some of that historical under plan trending when we did the cash flow plan. Capital outlay running ahead. We're kind of over under, but overall 700,000 on 27.4 million is pretty close. So we've identified the variances. We've got a pretty good handle on the sources of those variances, and when it comes to what we're doing in terms of the 5-year forecast that's going to be adopted by the board at their next meeting on Tuesday, that forecast does incorporate some of these favorable variances into that, so that we have a more current picture of where we're headed for that forecast. So continue to monitor, and kind of so far so good. So that's the report through September. Favorable variances that we can explain. So that's it.
Are there any questions for the treasurer on the September financial report? Does that conclude your report, Mr.
It does,
Treasurer?
President Baker.
Thank you very much. What I'd like to do now is call the meeting to order, now that we have acquired a quorum, and ask the treasurer to call the roll.
Eric Brown. Jody Zranin.
Here.
Mr. Green. Here. Ms. Hudson is here by phone, so
Here by phone.
Not part of the quorum. Mr. Jordan.
Here.
And Mr. Miller.
Here.
So you have 4 members present. You have quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Before we continue, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that Board Member Hudson has agreed to resume the chairmanship of the committee subsequent to the resignation of Board Member Peretti. So Board Member Hudson is on the phone. Excuse me. Chair Hudson is on the phone with us, so do try to speak up as we continue through the rest of the meeting. And now I believe we have the minutes to take up, if I'm not mistaken.
That's true.
All right. Hopefully you all had a chance to review the minutes. And is there a motion that they be approved as presented?
make a motion to accept.
I second it.
Any discussion on the minutes?
Yeah, just like the correction.
President Caniglio.
Not Mike, John. Correct that, I appreciate that.
All right. Did we note that? And Madam Internal Auditor?
One correction that I noticed, I did not see the status of member Muriel Putzinger. She's present or absent in the minutes.
Yeah, that's a correction that I was going to note, but absent, she was.
Okay, so that will be added. And did you have a question or comment on the first request for correction? I saw your hand go up.
No, I was going to make the Mary Jo correction.
Ah, very well then. Okay, any other comments on the minutes? Okay, any objections to those corrections? All right, Mr. Treasurer?
Ms. Zeranin?
Aye.
Mr. Green? Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
That motion carried.
Thank you very much, and that gets us back on track. So we are on item 4 now, FY 2019 budget request, if I'm not mistaken. And that brings us to the Executive Director of Budget and Finance, I believe.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir?
There are 6 items on here for the committee's review. The process with this is we go through a very extensive 5-year budgeting process with all of our budget managers. Anything that is outside of that process due to legal and/or contractual issues that arise during the year, or in this case, one of these is a change in regulations from the Ohio Department of Education. We have to be flexible and adapt to that, and we will bring items such as these before the committee off cycle from our normal budget process, present those here, provide the rationale and the resources that are needed. Once the committee reviews those, and if there's a recommendation, then it will go to subsequently to the Board of Education as part of the amended appropriations resolution, and then that will become part of our budget for the year. So with that, there are 6 items before you this evening. The first 4 are all from academic services. Mr. David Baker is here to kind of walk us through those. And then we have 1 from the Board of Education and 1 from the Internal Auditor's Office. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Baker.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Department of Academic Achievement Support Services, the Office of Teaching and Learning, the Division of ESL Services, in partnership with the Department of Accountability and other student services, bring a request to you for additional funds to support the ongoing administration of a screening assessment for newly enrolled English learners recently mandated by the Ohio Department of Education. This is another unfunded mandate that went into effect on October 1st of this new school year. There it is. A little about the ESL program, just to give you some background. Last school year, Columbus City Schools welcomed 2,677 new EL students into its classrooms. CCS EL students speak 100 different languages and come from 99 different countries of origin. As a district, we serve approximately 8,425 students who receive EL services, and that number changes on a daily basis with new students and new service needs. Services are provided along a continuum of a highly restrictive environment, such as Global Academy, where only pre-functioning English language learners are taught specific language acquisition skills along with core content, to then the other end of the continuum, where students will be immersed in the general education classroom and immersed in the English language. A little about the ESL staff. At the district level, our ESL staff is small but mighty. Under the direction of Michael Sane, a small staff of coordinators develop programming and support buildings in the implementation of those programs. They also support families as they transition into Columbus City Schools. At the building level, the district has 130 ESL teachers, including those who are located at Columbus Global Academy, as well as those in our sheltered sites and those who work with individual units across the district. Our current screeners are housed at the district's central enrollment. When I say screener, this would be an assessment that is given when students come in to enroll and families come in to enroll, just to get an idea as to what the current levels of performance are for students and what their ability levels are with language acquisition. We have 3 ESL instructional assistants who meet with families as they enroll and administer a screener assessment at that time. Those 3 instructional assistants administer the LAS Links, which is a paper screener that does not take a significant amount of time, but does provide enough information to tell us the student's current levels of performance and instructional needs. We're able to determine at that time where along that continuum an EL student will be best served, be it in that highly restrictive environment or a less restrictive environment such as the general education classroom. This process has worked well up until the newly mandated screener from the Ohio Department of Education was put into place. The issue that brings us to the table today is that starting on October 1st, the Ohio Department of Education has mandated that all public school districts across the state administer the ELPS 21, an online screening assessment to all new enrollees identified as ESL. The new assessment is aligned to the Ohio English Language Proficiency Assessment, or the OELPA, an annual test that's given to all ESL students that measures students' progress in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. This new assessment requires that a student be enrolled in the school district and be assigned an SSID number, which is a statewide student identifier. This process alone can take up to 3 hours just to obtain that number for a student. The new screener takes anywhere from 30 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the needs of the student, based on their current levels and their language acquisition skills. We are requesting 6 additional instructional assistant FTE to better serve students with this new screener process. Our rationale for the request lies in the fact that the assessment takes a significantly longer time than the current placement tool that we have in place. We will continue to use the current placement tool at the time of enrollment. The LAS Links tool does provide the needed information to identify a best placement for students and can be done at the time of enrollment. Once a student is enrolled, screened, and placed, an SSID number has been requested. The student can then report to his or her assigned school and services can begin. The new instructional assistants then will have 15 days, according to Ohio Department of Education, to report to that student's school and administer the new ELPS 21 assessment, meeting the mandated requirement of ODE within the approved time frame. This data will be used by students' classroom teachers as baseline data to support growth and progress monitoring throughout the school year. We will not be inconveniencing families by asking them to wait at the time of enrollment for an SSID number to be assigned, nor will families be asked to wait for potentially 3 hours while the assessment is being administered. All of this will happen while the student is in his or her school of placement. The new assessors will have the capacity to complete up to 4 assessments each day. During any time they are not assessing students, they will be used to support instruction in the buildings or assist with the LAS Links at central enrollment. Our request includes 6 instructional assistants, increasing a current assessor at central enrollment from 9 months to 12 months, includes the ability to purchase mobile technology for the assessors to go from school to administer the ELPS 21, and the mileage for the assessors to travel between those buildings. This is a total cost of $292,900. With this new request, Columbus City Schools will be able to meet the new unfunded mandate from the Ohio Department of Education and will have acquired useful data to serve as baseline data for student progress. Upon approval of the FAC and Board of Education, we would begin hiring those 6 instructional assistants. Once they have been hired, our ESL department will appropriately train them so that they can begin administering the ELPS 21, and I just really like saying ELPS 21. In the meantime, we can utilize the assessors at central enrollment to administer the new assessment as they best can. However, that's going to be very, very tight considering the time of year that they're under right now with the number of students we do have enrolling. In May, we will evaluate to see if the 6 IAs can effectively complete these assessments with the appropriate testing window or if additional resources need to be considered. I have Michael Sane here, who is our Director of ESL Services, if you have specific questions on this request. I also have Dr. Klein is here, who oversees central enrollment, so if there's questions about enrolling ELL, she can certainly best respond to those.
Are there questions for Mr. Baker? How did we determine that 6 was the right number to add?
Either of you want to? Dr. Klein.
Thank you, President Baker, for your question. What we actually did is took all of the data from last year. We looked at it regionally to find out exactly what regions of our district we had the greatest number of assessments that were given last year. And of course, this is based on last year's data. And then we approximated using the 4 a day to find out how many ESL instructional assistants we would need.
Okay. What is the General Assembly's or the State Department's rationale for adding this requirement?
The State Department's rationale is that not all districts previously used any kind of screener. And for the greatest number of majority of districts, they don't have multiple buildings, so they don't have a sheltered site. So placement is a little bit different in a district that only has 4 buildings, for example, about where they go. They just go to whatever school. So it's a little bit different in Columbus City Schools. We actually asked to pilot the OALPS 21 last year, and the Ohio Department of Education did not have it ready and did not allow anyone to actually pilot it. So it came on new August 15th, and we're excited about the correlation, but hesitant with regard to realizing that we don't want to have our students go to one school and then have to switch school 2 weeks later. Can you imagine what, kind of a disaster that would be with busing? And then the other thing is we want to make sure our ESL students get in school as soon as they can, just like any other student.
Thank you. Any other questions on that item? Thank you, Mr. Baker.
All right. Betty Hill, if you want to join me for this one. And Leslie Kelly, be ready for the next one. Thank you. The Department of Academic Achievement Support Services and the Division of Unified Arts brings a request for additional FTE to support the elementary vocal music and physical education instruction in Columbus City Schools. A little about elementary unified arts in the district. The district currently employs 50 teachers who teach elementary art, 2 who teach dance and/or drama, 15 teaching instrumental music or beginning band, 50 who teach physical education, and 49 who teach vocal music or general music, and 8 itinerant teachers who travel around the district teaching elementary string orchestra. These teachers serve 74 different schools across the district, including all those different grade bands that you see listed there. All students in grades kindergarten through grade 5 and grade 6, of course, in our K-6 buildings have the opportunity for 45 minutes of art, music, and physical education of instruction in those areas on a weekly basis. The issue that brings us to the table today is a result of the current negotiated agreement between the Columbus Board of Education and the Columbus Education Association. When the current agreement was ratified, both parties agreed to 45 minutes of art, music, and PE to all students in grades kindergarten through grade 5. This is a significant change to previous unified arts offerings, and every attempt has been made to meet the spirit of that agreement without overextending our teachers. We've run into a few situations that just cannot be reconciled, and the need for additional resources is apparent. The request that we are making for Unified Arts is to add 1 elementary physical education teacher to the roster and 1 elementary vocal music teacher to the roster for the current school year. The additional physical education teacher will right-size the current staffing at Fairwood, Shady Lane, and Berwick. The additional vocal music teacher will right-size the staffing levels at Hubbard, Livingston, Berwick, and Windsor. So it's kind of a ripple effect that once some resources are adding, it ripples out to other buildings as well. The cost of this request is a total cost of $178,948 to cover salary and benefits for both of those teachers. The impact on the request is not only will the request right-size the current staffing levels at these schools, but students will be instructed by licensed teachers rather than available substitutes on a daily basis, as is happening right now. The timeline, if approved by this committee and the Board of Education, HR would immediately post those positions and hopefully have teachers in place in November. Until then, substitute teachers will be used to cover those classes. Questions on this request, trying to get the unified arts balanced and right-sized?
Thank you, Mr. Baker. President, I beg your pardon. Mr. Gooding.
This one, I did want to point that out because I didn't mention it earlier. When we look at our total budget $1.4 billion, over $900 million general fund. When we look at a request of $100,000, it seems very small, rather insignificant. But we did want to call that out because our process changed somewhat as we went through in working with the forecasted deficit that we saw. The board and administration made some very difficult decisions around budget reductions. And in that, because we had 324.5 FTE is part of the November of 16 levy plan, and we delayed the implementation of those for a couple years to help us get through that process. So we had no new FTE included in the current year's budget. So as these things come up, even though they're very small in terms of dollar amount, any new requests to add to that budget, we're bringing through this process. So I don't want you to look at that and go, okay, it's only $100,000. We're looking at a $900 million budget. Why are we even addressing those at this point? But that was some of the change that we had because of the budget reduction process we went through in the spring. So I just wanted to clarify that for everyone.
Thank you. President Caniglio.
I have a question. So with the $89,000 per FTE, what do you base that on? Is that like a new hire 3-year step, or what do you base that on?
We actually looked at the last 5 years of actual new hires and looked at placement from whether it was a bachelor's on 150 with 150 hours in years of experience. So I think it was a master's with 5 years experience, if I believe, was the placement. So we looked at actual data of new hires coming into the district.
So it's based on, it's just based on an average, so that might not necessarily be the cost of.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's just a projection at this point, because we don't know that with these teachers, that if we're looking at one vocal music, at this point, we don't know that we're going to hire Mike McCammon to teach vocal music and April 9th to hire phys ed. This is just an estimate and a projection at this point. Just the assumption.
Then
piece.
I have another question, if that's okay. And it goes back to, and I do appreciate that you guys are hiring 2 new teachers. I guess my question is, if these hires are based on enrollment and we know what the enrollment's going to be, why does it take so long to get teachers in these positions? Does that make any sense? Right.
Excellent question, and part with the whole new structure to Unified Arts and increasing time, of course, every effort's made to resolve those conflicts that buildings may have, and we get the principals involved with that process, so they were very involved with what the new schedules would look like, given that every grade now has 45 minutes and so on. These are 3 buildings that were working through that scheduling conflict. The other piece that we added in is that when we did the October, what we still refer to as October count, one of those schools did get an additional allocation, which meant they were already struggling with a schedule resolution, and then add on that there's another class now at one of those buildings. It just became apparent that the only way to right size and resolve that conflict was going to be to add another allocation. That didn't occur until early October, when that decision is finally made, or late September. So you put those 2 things together, it's 2 pieces.
I just want to quickly add, you stated we know what the enrollment, we don't know.
You don't?
Yeah.
We don't know until about this time of year what the actual enrollment is based on who has come into the district.
I guess, like, what I'm referring to is maybe you've known since the beginning of the year what the enrollment is in that building. For example, there was a pretty good idea.
A pretty good idea,
Right,
but
and
it's not exact, though,
but-
I guess.
Right, and I guess the only thing I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, for example, in Berwick, they've been without a teacher since the beginning of the year. We've pretty not much known that, and they needed one. And is there a more efficient way that we could get a teacher into these positions?
We can definitely review our processes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you.
I do have to
Appreciate
say,
it.
when it comes to classroom allocations, our school leadership team has done a phenomenal job these last few years with better predicting. And so as a district, we are getting much better, and fewer moves are occurring each fall, which is outstanding, because it's less impact on kids that way, that's for sure. So.
Any other questions on the Unified Arts staffing?
And in this one, I'm sorry,
Yes,
just
sir.
to clarify, it covers all the fringe and it's the salary and fringe in this one. Where that was broken out in the last one, this is all inclusive. Gotcha, okay. Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Move on to Unified Arts, or move on to English Language Arts. Leslie Kelly. All right, so the next one is to bring to you a request to support intervention, family engagement, and professional development for our district's kindergarten through grade 3 students, families, and teachers as a result of reviewing data from our most recent local report card. little bit about the K-12 Curriculum Office, just to give you some background to their work. This team serves all schools across the district with a focus on building capacity of teachers, leaders, and families. The K-12 Curriculum team is responsible for the development of new courses to meet students' needs and interests. They develop needed resources for our teachers and help to plan, organize, and deliver professional development to teachers, building leaders, and families. The team also coordinates district-wide initiatives and supports individual schools and classroom teachers as needed. The K-12 curriculum team also is small but mighty, led by Director Leslie Kelly. To my left, the team consists of 5 teachers on special assignment who coordinate secondary curriculum for all our district's middle and high schools. That's 5 teachers on special assignment coordinating efforts for all of our district's middle schools and high schools. Leslie has 4 TOSAs supporting all of our elementary curriculum needs. 6 other TOSAs support K-12 efforts in areas such as world languages, unified arts, library, media, instructional technology, STEM initiatives, and our facility at Spruce Run. A little about how our kindergarten through grade 3 students are currently served. We have 173 teachers serving 4,345 kindergarten students in elementary schools, 174 and a half kindergarten or grade 1 teachers serving 4,237 grade 1 students, 174 and a half grade 2 teachers serving 4,071 grade 2 students, and 181 third grade teachers serving 4,461 students. Those would be split classrooms where you see those 0.5 somewhere. We don't have half of a teacher, that's for sure. The issue that we bring to you today is a result of reviewing the most recent local report card from the Ohio Department of Education. That report card shows that only 36.1% of our third grade students scored proficient or better on the English Language Arts AIR assessment last spring. Additionally, the district earned a D on the Improving At-Risk K-3 Readers component of the local report card. This component examines the district's ability to increase the number of students who are identified as not on track to be reading on grade level 1 year to being on track the following year. We are requesting funds to support our district initiatives around K-3 literacy. The first is a Saturday Surge K-3 teacher professional development opportunity. This will provide 200 kindergarten, first, second, and third grade teachers across the district the opportunity to participate in 3 Saturday professional development learning opportunities focused on specific evidence-based early literacy instructional practices. The second initiative provides 40 part-time hourly reading specialists to provide intensive support to students demonstrating the need for additional intervention in grades K through 1, focusing on reading foundational skills. Specialists will be allocated to buildings with the greatest need based on staffing and data first. The third initiative is to supplement our current winter break literacy activities with more robust activities, books for students to take home, and activities for families to do together during the weeks of winter break. The fourth initiative is to expand our current Saturday Super Reader program from 4 weeks to 8 weeks and include transportation, both increasing instructional time and reducing a barrier to participation and opening the program to students in grades 2 and 3 who are not on track to be reading on grade level by the end of the year. Our rationale, very much based on research, looking at building the capacity of teachers, knowing that the professional development we would be offering to teachers has a high effect, even more so than small class size and teacher experience. So certainly building that capacity among our teachers is what will help push that over for our students. Also a greater impact on student capacity with the stronger intervention, both individual intervention with LLI as well as the Saturday program being expanded, and a greater impact on family capacity, family activities being built into not only the winter activities, but also during the Saturday Super Reader, there would be time for families to come in and receive guidance from instructional professionals there on how to help their children. The total cost of these 3 initiatives is $1,811,387. All initiatives will impact the third grade achievement on the English Language Arts Assessment and/or our K-3 literacy component of the local report card. The impact on this request, again, is that increase in both teacher capacities, family capacity, as well as student capacity, increasing the number of students who would be scoring proficient or better on the AIR test. Our Saturday Reader program has shown significantly that students who participate in Saturday Super Reader score higher on that achievement test than students who do not participate. And so by opening it up to twice as much instructional time, we feel certain that that will increase the number of students who will be successful, as well as opening up to grade 2 will better prepare them then for that round of assessments when they are third graders. We'll also then see that achieving that C level on that K3 component in the grade card. Our timeline, just to give you an idea of how this would be implemented, Saturday Surge K3 teacher PD would begin in November and go through January. The intensive reading intervention would begin in November and go through April, which is when the test would be administered. The reading break activities, of course, would begin in December and go through January, those 2 weeks during winter break. However, planning would begin immediately on those. Saturday Super Reader would take place in January and go through March, and then the assessment again given in April.
Can I add a point of clarity?
Absolutely.
The Saturday Surge PD is actually 2 cohorts. Each cohort will have 200 people, so it's 400 teachers total.
Apologies. 400, not 200.
Yes, 200 each cohort, 2 cohorts.
Are there any questions for Mr. Baker related to the K3 Literacy Surge Initiative? So we yes, Madam Chair.
Mary Jo. Hi, thank you. I have a question. Just with regard to the overall package, what is this in addition to, or in addition to the FTE positions that were in the current budget, or are we foregoing any positions? That's kind of part one of my question. And part two, for the treasurer, how will this affect forecast going forward?
Part one, Mr. Baker, are you clear on the question?
I don't think so. Ms. Hudson, could you repeat the first part of that question?
Are we, in considering these positions, are we suggesting that we're going to forego any other positions? Is this, that might be unfilled?
Okay, got it. Thank you for the clarification. These would be new positions. These would be new requests putting these part-time hourly reading specialists into those buildings to support those students. So that is new.
Is that right? Let's clarify.
Yeah, you said, I wouldn't call them new positions,
Okay.
right? We're giving them contracts to come in and provide tutoring services.
Part-time hourly contracts,
Right,
yes.
so they're not new
They're
FTE.
not new FTEs.
Right. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Yeah, they're not
Okay.
full-time FTEs, they are part-time hourly.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And some of it's lost in mine, which is, I can ask more about that later then. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. And question two, or part two of your question, could you restate that for the?
I heard it.
Oh, he heard
What-
you.
Yeah, I did. What
Yeah,
impact
correct.
does, well, really, that question can apply not only to this 1.8 million request, but to all the requests this evening. What impact do they have on the forecast? Clearly, they will increase expenditures. When you're talking about $2 to $3 million in our forecast, you can see that we have variances on an ongoing basis that can swing one way or the other in that dollar amount. So am I going to stop and recast the forecast because of this action? Probably not, no. And we'll just see that play out in the actual expenditures as this year runs on.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we believe that this is a high leverage strategy that's going to have an impact and help us to move the needle. Is that the idea?
Yes. Based on the proven programming with the Saturday Super Reader, adding your second grade to it, so now you're building on your base, and then expanding the days, Saturdays from 4 to 8, and then as well increasing the number of students that are there, you're able to bring that effective programming beyond just those students. And then also the addition of busing is going to increase access, because for the past 2 years, we haven't busing hasn't been one of the components. So we have that piece. And then also looking at the Saturday Surge, building that capacity around for teachers, specifically in our K-3, and also targeting your foundational skills, your phonics, and your phonemic awareness, and really focusing on explicit phonics, phonemic awareness instruction, as well as word study, vocabulary acquisition as we get up into 3rd grade, is going to allow those teachers to target interventions during their 30-minute intervention block in their classrooms. Because not only are they getting the PD, but then they're also getting the resources to implement the PD. So that's key. And then those winter break packets, we typically do pretty robust activities for our 3rd grade, and then we have activities that we send home as schools print out and give to their families. But now K-3 will get the robust activities that they can go home and engage with their families throughout those 2 weeks. And then the part-time hourlies, LLI, is actually a intervention that's called out on What Works Clearinghouse as high probability of increasing student achievement. So again, with those teachers, with that being provided at a greater rate, and having more access, students having more access to that program, each of these pieces that we're adding is definitely a high leverage component that will help us move the needle.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Mr.
Jordan?
The multimedia outreach, talk to me about what that looks like and how will you measure whether that has been effective for boosting enrollment?
So over the past 2 years with our Saturday Super Reader, we have done a phone dialer. I feel really bad that I can't see you.
That's okay.
I'm
I'm trying to
this
win
way.
one way or another.
That's hard for me. So we have done a phone dialer as well as sent flyers out, and that helps. We also have done a lot of one-on-one calls, but we would like to get more families. And so what we will do is we will look at not only our enrollment starting, because we kind of have an open enrollment. Because what happens here, honestly, because it's a great program, we have CAPES and we really do it up, and it's all about kids earning superpowers and being powerful readers. The kids go back, so we always have a surge the second Saturday, because kids go back and they talk about their day. So we want to be able to get that information out to families, and at a more tangible way, we're looking at radio slots and maybe some more visual multimedia. But then we'll measure that by looking at not only our influx over the first couple days, but also our retention. And then we'll look at that compared to the previous 2 years. So I have a member of my team who is just my data queen, and we have been very kind of on top of keeping our data over the past 2 years. So we'll really be able to see how adding the transportation as well as more sites. So we're going from 5 to 7 sites, specifically adding a site on the north end and on the east side. Because for the past 2 years, our north end site, CSIA, has been our largest site as well as Afrocentric. So that is where most of our families have been pulling to. So we'll open another east side site and another north side site. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions or comments on that item? All right, carry on.
And the final request from Academic Services is to support professional development for our district's high school mathematics teachers as a result of reviewing data from our most recent local report card. I'm not going to go through the details on the K-12 curriculum or the curriculum staff because it has not changed in the last 10 minutes. However, I will share with you a little bit about the high school's mathematics program. Just to give you a little background here, we have approximately 160 teachers teaching Math 1 and or Math 2 in our district's high schools, 3,697 students taking Math 1, 3,521 students taking Math 2, and this does include a handful of middle schoolers who move up and take high school math courses who would then be taking those high school math assessments as well. The issue that we're bringing before you today is a result of a deep dive into the data from last spring's end-of-course exams in both Math 1 and Math 2, as reflected on the most recent local report card from the Ohio Department of Education. At a high level, the data shows that only 24.2% of students scored proficient or better on Math 1 end-of-course exams, and only 13.9% of students scored proficient or better on the Math 2 end-of-course exam. Our curriculum team, though, dug deeper into this data and has recognized a significant gap in learning. When looking further into the data, they recognized that specific standards in geometry were holding students back. More than 90% of students taking the Math 1 exam scored a 0 on 30% of the geometry-related questions, while more than 90% of students taking Math 2 scored a 0 on 55% of the geometry-related questions. The curriculum team feels that if they can provide intense professional development on the content knowledge and instructional practices impacting geometry standards, we will see significant gains in student achievement.
David, could you explain the grading style for the committee members on the end of course exams?
I'll let Leslie explain how that works.
So when you say the grade.
Zero, the 1, the 2.
standards.
Okay, so when it says 0, that means they completely miss that. Some of our questions are worth 0 points, some of them are 1 point, and some of them are 2 points. So on those questions where it said got 0, that means they didn't get any, they got 0 points. They completely did not understand. So that's very significant, especially when you're looking at those high numbers, the 90%, greater than 90%. That shows a significant gap.
Okay. We are requesting $220,225 to provide 3 Saturday professional development learning opportunities for every Math 1 and Math 2 teacher before the spring administration of the end-of-course exams in Math 1 and 2. Funds will also support ongoing follow-up with these teachers to assist them in the implementation of the instructional practices, as well as provide teachers with the resources for implementation. Our rationale is based on research that shows that building teacher capacity and providing them with the best possible instructional practices and resources has a greater impact on student achievement, more so even than years of experience or smaller class size. Our proposal will provide our current Math 1 and Math 2 teachers with the best possible instructional practices, resources, and supports to have the greatest impact on their students. We're requesting $220,225. Actually, did I miss one of the slides? Is it duplicated? No. The cost will cover, the cost of the consultant who is highly skilled in those specific geometry standards, the extended time for our curriculum team to design the professional development and resources, as well as the stipends for each Math 1 and Math 2 teacher to participate in the 3 Saturday learning sessions. The impact of the request, or what we expect to see as a result of the professional development, is not only an increase in the teacher capacity to be able to more effectively provide instruction on specific geometry standards, but also to increase the number of students scoring proficient or better on the end-of-course exams in the spring of 2019. Should this committee and the Board of Education approve this request, we will immediately begin planning for the professional development to occur in November, December, and February, and students will take the end-of-course exams in April. Questions on this one?
Questions for Mr. Baker on Math 1 and 2? So we believe this is another one of those high leverage strategies that we can use that's really going to yield some positive impact.
Yes. So when we look again, because the other piece that's really important to note here is that the state has revised standards. So there were revisions that take place this year. And so specifically from looking at Math 1 and Math 2, there have been a lot of changes. So there have been some of those geometry standards that were in Math 2 that are now in Math 1. Some that came from Math 3 that are in Math 2. Some that came from Math 1 that are in Math 2. So not only is it important that we target the geometry content, but it's also that we ensure that all of our Math 1 and our Math 2 teachers fully understand the changes that were made, as well as the expectations from the state with the new test blueprints. Because if you don't understand the finish line, it's hard to plan the route to get there. And then the other piece too is really making sure that we're providing that content-specific PD. We do a lot around pedagogy, but high school math is a very complex course. So how often do we provide actual content PD for our teachers? So the consultants we're looking at bringing in, one of them is Dr. Brad Findell from Ohio State University, who's a math professor, because we want our teachers to have the opportunity to become students again and really dive into that content, as well then as getting the pedagogy to support that. So it will be 3 days, and there's a purpose behind those 3 days. They're spread out because we need to give teachers an opportunity to take what they learned, apply it, bring it back and discuss it, and have time to collaborate with other Math 1 and Math 2 teachers, do some collaborative planning. Because you could have times in a high school where I may be the only Math 1 teacher. And so who do I bounce ideas off of? When does that happen? So really providing that opportunity. And we're being very targeted. This is going to be all around those specific standards. Because if you have not over 90% of your students in Math 2 who are getting 0 score on 55% of geometry-related questions, there's also the modeling and the modeling piece of that kids can get deemed twice. A lot of your math, your geometry standards are around modeling. And so really that's the pedagogy part, really making sure our teachers have the knowledge, but also the resources to do that in their classroom. So yes.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to also add that to provide a big picture for the members of the committee, we used our data over the last year and a half to create a 5-year strategic plan that's aligned to our 5-year budget plan. And in that strategic plan, there are long-term strategies that we're working on right now and are implementing that will, lift up the ability and the capacity of our teachers and our students to do better on these state tests. What this is an effort based on our data from the report card to really target, as Ms. Kelly has already indicated, to really target those areas where we think we have the greatest opportunity for growth with our students. To improve the overall academic performance of the district. And so these are initiatives and activities that are more short-term in nature compared to the long-term initiatives and strategies that are a part of our strategic plan. So this is building upon those initiatives and strategies that we already have in place.
And you'll see with both of these pieces, and David already shared the research, it's really around building teacher capacity. We've got to look at, and as Dr. Stanford said, that long-term sustainability, and really investing in that teacher capacity and making sure our teachers have the knowledge and the supports that they need. The other piece too, especially with geometry specifically, is the language and really the vocabulary, because really making sure that our students understand the vocabulary and it's not the vocabulary that's getting in their way, because the student can understand the math but get lost in the vocabulary. So are we really pulling that vocabulary out and front-loading with that vocabulary while we teach that math practices? So we're I know I'm very, very excited about this one because I see it having such a great impact on our teachers and our students.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that last point is very, very critical, because we know already from the ton of research that has been done over the years that kids living in poverty already come with a vocabulary deficit when they come to school. And so being able to build up that vocabulary ability and capacity of our students is absolutely critical if we're ever going to see any market change on our state report card and our state testing.
And it would also be nice if the state stopped moving the finish line.
Yes, it would.
Wouldn't that be nice?
I think you should call them.
We're busy, the phone's busy right now, but maybe after the meeting. Well, Mr. Treasurer, now. Yes, Mr. Gooding?
Dr. Stanford's comments, all 4 of these have something we're pushing us to do this. Obviously the first one is a new mandate from the Ohio Department of Education. The second one was to keep us in compliance with the master agreement with the teachers union. And then the last 2 were in response to the notification from the Ohio Department of Education about a potential academic distress commission down the road. So these proposals are before us today to get ahead of that before somebody makes those decisions for us. So that's why those are here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Next item.
Next one, I'll turn this over to Dr. Rouse to talk about the
Thank you very much, President Baker and the Finance and Appropriations Committee. Here before you to request an additional $30,000. This is to pay for the outside legal counsel that has assisted the Board of Education in its superintendent search. We're wrapping this process up, but as we're getting towards the end, we require some additional funds. I've spoken with outside counsel. They believe that this amount will be sufficient to cover, not only will be sufficient to cover what we need going forward as we wrap up this process. So this is the last time I plan to be before you making this request. I'm sure the board equally is happy that we're wrapping this process up as well.
Yes. Yes. Any questions for Dr. Roush on the outside legal counsel budget request? Thank you, Dr. Roush.
Carolyn Smith in the Office of Internal Audit has a proposal to make as well.
I'm going to come over here because you'll never be able to hear me without some type of information. Kevin Sankowski, he's the audit manager of Special Reviews in the Office of Internal Audit, to join me. He put together a lot of the numbers and the data supporting this information. He's also the person assigned to see this project through to completion. So I'll start with the last question, the reason why outside of the normal budget process. We started looking at our processes inside of our office. One of the comments that we're constantly making to entities that we audit is, look at your processes and see if you're being as effective and efficient as possible. Are you taking advantage of technology? And when we asked that question of ourselves, the answer was no. All of our processes are based on either Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, or SharePoint. And the same issues that we have noted with other departments, we were noticing with our own processes, that they were labor intensive, that there was a rekeying of information, increased the possibility of errors and risk. So that process and that look back started around March. Me being an auditor, I wanted to have hard numbers before I actually put anything into our budget. That did not happen until after the current budget had been approved. So that is why we are coming to you outside of the normal budget process. And another big driving factor is that if we act before January the 1st, there's a significant cost savings of around $6,000 to $10,000. The $6,000 is we'll get 18 months of service for the cost of 12 months. And then the other cost is that I have some very motivated salespeople who are hoping to make their year-end quotas. So those initiatives also go away at December 31st. So that's the reason why we're outside of the normal budget process. What we're asking for is an investment in audit management software to improve the departmental efficiencies through technological automation and integration of certain tasks. As I explained, when you see our reports, you just see the end product. You don't know what it takes to get to that end product. And we have figured out if we were able to automate our processes at a minimum, we would be saving around $10,000 in cost, and we will be able to take that. It's important to our office, but it's not as high of an investment or high of a return on investment as far as doing another audit. So there would be an additional 200 hours available to do another audit, which to us is important. We're a small department trying to provide adequate coverage for a large district. Every single dollar that we can put back into our main purpose is important. What we are asking for is a one-time investment of $71,400. And after that, there will be a yearly investment of around approximately $6,000 to $14,500. I think I have covered 3 questions I was instructed to answer, Mr. Gooding. So with that, I will turn it over to the committee for questions.
Thank you, Madam Internal Auditor. Are there questions, committee members, for the Internal Auditor on this request? Or yes, sir.
And so is the ongoing increase of the funds just for training, or just as if software were to change, the cost goes up or something? With 6,000 to 10,000 per year?
Right, the 6,000 represents the discount that we will be paying for, we will get 12 months for the cost of 6 months. And then will go back to the standard, 14,000 for the software licenses and for the support and for the product.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Internal Auditor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sinkowski. And I do believe that concludes our budget requests for this meeting, if I'm not mistaken. Madam Chair, have you any questions or comments on any of the budget requests?
No additional comments, thank you.
Thank you. And is it at this time that we would anticipate a motion to recommend these go to the full board for approval? All right. Is there a motion then that we recommend the items in number 4?
I'll move it.
That's a motion. Mr. Miller, is there a second?
I will second it.
Okay, so these items will be, if this motion passes, they will be recommended to the full board for consideration and approval. Mr. Treasurer, would you care to call the roll?
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Zaranen?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to the personnel budget.
You have a couple items in your packet here. We've previously talked about taking our current process and expanding it further. And this was with former Chair Preddy, the kind of the personnel budget. So what you'll see are two examples. And I will tell you why it talks about pharmacists in here, because there is a reason for this. So what I took is I took my OPU as an example. So what you'll see is everything is in here is in the budget narratives that we do on an annual basis. So what is new, and we modeled this after the Legislative Service Commission and what was referred to as the Red Book. So we actually used the State Board of Pharmacy as an example, so folks could see that, because they knew that Dominic and possibly Mary Jo were familiar with that process from the prior roles. So what we have here is, if you look at the top, it identifies the OPU, the 5-year vision for the department, and then the staffing levels is the new addition to this document. So what we will do is for each OPU, we'll go through and tell you who the folks are in that, and this is word for word copied from the State Board of Pharmacy's Red Book, so that's why it looks that way. And then there will be a table underneath that in each one of these OPU, what types of positions they are and how many FTE we have in the general fund or the operating fund on an annual basis, and what those projected levels are going forward. This is from FY19, which is the current year, through FY23, so the timing of this aligns with the 5-year forecast. That's why we have the dates there. So you'll see that the FTE number change or percentage change as well. So those will be updated by OPU, but we just wanted to get a sense if this was something that made sense to folks going forward, if we're kind of moving down the right path. And everything below that is what you've seen in the past from the non-personnel side of the general fund. So now this narrative shows you the personnel side as well as the non-personnel side in 2 different sections. Behind that will be a new appendix. This is an example using Centennial High School as an example. So each OPU, and we have roughly 200 OPUs, the appendix that this is from, take a deep breath, 614 pages of this in addition to our, 900 and some pages before. It's a really big document if this all comes together. So every OPU will have this, and you'll see in here we have employee numbers, we have position numbers, the description, so you can see at the top that we've got a cook one that's 196 days, you have the FTE, we have the salary amount, we have the codes, everything's in here. So you can see all the positions that are at Centennial High School. So each high school, each middle school, each elementary, each district-wide department, everybody will have one of these, so we know what the positions are at each location. So this will kind of be the appendix that will tie into the budget narrative piece. So as we started going through that, we just want to get a sense from folks if you think this is heading in the right direction. If we're going completely the wrong direction, let us know, and then we can go back and revise this. But we wanted to get something in front of you to be able to react to and see if we're on the right path.
Chair Hudson, do you have this in front of you? Are you able to see this?
No, I am not. I'll need to look at it offline. No, I'm driving.
Okay, all right, yeah, don't look at it now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, committee members, comments, feedback?
Odds are good.
Yeah.
This is it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And of course, people can feel free to call you or reach out if they have questions or comments. When I say you, I mean the
Absolutely,
budget
yes.
director,
Yes, sir.
yes? Okay. Very good. Thanks for continuing to march that forward.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about related to personnel budget?
No, I was just going to jump to the next one.
Yep.
And the next one is, we just put this on the agenda, just as standing as just an update with the budget timeline, where we are in the process, and what the topics for conversation at upcoming meetings are, just as a reference, just so you have that. Nothing's changed since the last meeting.
Okay. Any questions on the budget timeline? Okay, thank you, Mr. Gooding. Before we adjourn, I do want to officially welcome Jack Green to the committee. Mr. Green, thank you for your willingness to serve. Look forward to seeing you at meetings. Thank you very much. And also want to thank Jody Zaranin for her service. This is her last meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Baker.
Thank you for all your hard work on the committee. I know that it can be a lot, and I know that committee members sacrifice their time to do this in support of
for
the
the
district.
opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good luck in grad school as you continue your education.
President Baker?
Yes, Madam Chair?
President Baker, if I might, so Jody Duran was one of our inaugural members and has been a loyal member. She's been really great. Jody, thank you so much. You have been there through all the bumps of getting started, and you really provided a great community voice for the committee. And I just wanted to personally thank you for your service as well.
I appreciate it, MJ. Chairman Hudson, thank you.
MJ is just fine, and thank you so much.
Absolutely, a charter member.
Chairwoman, yes. Well, thank
So,
you.
any other discussion? All right, I will now entertain a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Oh, I move that we adjourn the Finance Committee meeting.
Very good, is there a second? Second. Mr. Treasurer, hearing nothing else for the good of the order today.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Zaranin?
Yes.
And Mr. Green?
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you, we stand adjourned.